Well, hello, everyone. I'm Tyler Chrestman, and welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about the tragic death of Miss Breonna Taylor. This has got to be one of the biggest, most misunderstood news stories of 2020. And there have been a lot of big and misunderstood news stories, so that's saying something. We're going to dive in a little bit on the history of this incident and try and dissect all the things that went wrong and kind of figure out, maybe put some perspective on everything that's going on. So I think the first thing we got to start with is who was Breonna Taylor? Breonna Taylor is a 26-year-old female. She worked on and off as an EMT. I think at the time of her death, she was working in an emergency room as a technician. She had a boyfriend, this guy named Kenneth Walker, and by all accounts, Kenneth Walker seems like a decent and good dude. I mean, no history with law enforcement or anything like that. Seems like a general all-around good guy. He was the guy who was there the night that she was shot and killed. But Breonna Taylor's problems lie in the fact that she also had another boyfriend. So she had Kenneth Walker, who was the good boyfriend. Then she had this other boyfriend, this guy named Jamarcus Glover. And Jamarcus Glover is not a good dude. He's a bad guy. And I think that's an objective fact. I don't think that's a judgment on my part. I think that's an objective fact. Jamarcus Glover is not a good person. He's a guy who's been arrested multiple times for drug violations. He is believed by the police to be a big-time drug dealer currently. And Breonna basically came on the police's radar as a result of this guy. She had bailed him out of jail twice in 2017 and then actually bailed out another drug dealer that he was associated with last year in 2019. Her home had actually once been searched before because she was involved. Breonna Taylor had rented a car, and she gave the keys to Jamarcus, who then gave the keys to an associate known only as Rambo. And then Rambo was shot to death in that rental car with drugs all over the car. So this caused the police to wonder, who is this woman, Breonna Taylor, who's renting cars for known drug dealers? And they started, again, she was just on the radar after this incident where some guy wound up dead in a rental car in her name. And the police were already observing her boyfriend, Jamarcus Glover, who was believed to be operating a trap house kind of across town from where Breonna lived. And the police believed that he was using Breonna's house to pick up and either store drugs or cash. And they believe this because Jamarcus Glover was actually seen leaving Breonna Taylor's residence with packages under his arm and then driving straight to the trap house across town. It was confirmed through the U.S. Postal Inspector that Jamarcus had indeed been receiving packages at that address. So this is not a theory. The U.S. Postal Inspector said, yeah, he was in fact receiving things there. And he had even listed her address as his home address the month before the police broke into that house. Served the warrant on that house, would be a better way to phrase that. Now, so all of this stuff, the rental car, the fact that there's known drug dealers receiving packages at the house, the fact that her vehicle had been seen multiple occasions leaving the trap house with this known drug dealer. Why am I bringing all this stuff up? It's not to say that Breonna Taylor was some big drug kingpin. That is obviously not true. She was not. By all accounts, again, she did not seem like a bad person. However, if you listen to the people who are out there in the streets protesting, if you listen to the news media, all you're getting right now is that Breonna Taylor was a EMT who was shot in some botched warrant and wrongfully killed in her own home. And we're going to go over all that in just a second. But I just wanted to provide a little bit of context. That was only a couple minutes worth of things that all it takes is to show that there's a reason the police knocked on the door that night. They didn't just show up randomly. It's not they didn't go to the wrong address. They didn't go to the wrong house. They were going to Breonna Taylor's house for a reason, because a known drug dealer had been using that house to store drugs, or at least pick drugs up and take them across town, pick money up, take it across town. He had been using that house to throw the police off his trail, and that guy is a drug dealer. He wasn't picked up in August back in August on drug charges yet again. Again, the house that they were observing across town that he was staying at, when they served a warrant on that house, found drugs all over the house, found money all over the house. So not a good dude, and he was, in fact, using Breonna Taylor's house to move drugs. Is at least what it appears like. Now, again, not to say Breonna Taylor's a terrible person involved in all this stuff, but she was unfortunately involving herself in some shady business by just being associated with this guy and allowing him to receive packages at her house. So the police showed up there for a good reason. They were suspicious that there was some illicit material in that house, or that she was in some capacity operating with this guy who operated the trap house across town, because she was in fact associated with this guy operating the trap house across town. Now let's talk about the actual warrant search that night. So it's just after midnight on March 13th. Police officers executed a raid on Breonna's apartment. Now they had a warrant for a no-knock entry, which means that they don't have to announce themselves. And these no-knock warrants are useful because if you knock and you announce your presence, it gives people inside the chance to destroy evidence, to flee, to cover things up. There's a reason why they want to come in without a warning. It also gives them a chance to prepare themselves. If they're not the kind who are going to go peacefully, they have a moment where they can kind of get ready. So they had received a no-knock warrant from a judge, so they had permission just to bust that door and go in, try and catch people sleeping, which is is the goal. However, they did actually knock. This is verified on all accounts. The police knocked on the door multiple times before they used the battering ram to knock it in. And the problem is that the police say that they were announcing themselves as police. They were knocking on the door very loudly and yelling very loudly. Now, one of Breonna Taylor's neighbors said that they heard the police say, in fact, yes, they yelled that they were the police. I heard it at least once. The problem is that from inside the apartment, Breonna Taylor, and this is all from the account of Kenneth Walker, her boyfriend who was staying over, the good boyfriend who was staying over, they said that they never heard the police announce themselves. The police, in return, say they never heard Breonna Taylor or Kenneth Walker yelling, "Who is it? Who's there?" And so it appears that, like, through the giant knocking, the banging on the door, that they were unable to communicate with each other. And so Kenneth Walker doesn't hear the police yell, "Police." The police aren't hearing Kenneth Walker and Breonna Taylor yell, "Who's at the door?" And so the police, not hearing an answer from inside, use a battering ram to hit the door. Now, at this point, Kenneth Walker has a gun. He is licensed to carry a gun. It is not illegal for him to have a gun. He had a gun which he is legally allowed to own. He had that gun because previously, Breonna Taylor's bad boyfriend, Jamarcus Glover, had shown up at the house and caused an incident. So he thought that this guy, this bad dude, this alleged drug dealer, do I have to say alleged? He's been convicted before. This drug dealer had shown up at the house before. So Kenneth Walker and Breonna Taylor both thought, oh, this is Jamarcus Glover showing up at the house. So when this door busts off the hinges, Kenneth Walker fires once down this hallway. Now, again, when he says he doesn't know it was the police, he comes off as very credible. And I'll tell you all the reasons why in just a second. But he throws a round down the hallway, hits one of the police officers. So the police officers, having now been shot at, return fire down the hallway. I think they fired a total of 10 shots. One of the officer who was hit fired 6. He shot 4 down the hallway, went around the corner, fired 2 more. I believe there were 4 other shots fired from that hallway. So all the rounds go down the hallway. They appear at least to be the rounds that struck Breonna Taylor, because both her and Kenneth Walker were at the end of the hallway. So the police were shooting back at the guy who had just shot at them. And it looks like Breonna Taylor got hit in the crossfire. Now, Kenneth Walker, and there's a police officer hit. So he's hit in the femoral artery. They put pressure on it. They managed to get a tourniquet around his leg. Very lucky that he survived. He very easily could have died. So they get him out of there. And now they're they're working on trying to figure out, okay, we have to go back into this house because there's a guy down there with a gun who just shot a police officer, almost killed him. Meanwhile, inside, Kenneth Walker had gone back into the bedroom with Breonna Taylor, and they're lying there. She's been hit. According to the coroner report, she must have died within a minute of being shot. She had been shot 5 times and died almost immediately. So the boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, he calls 911 from the bedroom. And this is where I said this is why he comes across as very believable. So he calls 911 from the bedroom, and he says, someone just broke into the house. They shot my girlfriend. She's dying. Please send help because she's dying, and there's somebody out there with a gun trying to kill me. The police, meanwhile, have no idea that this guy in the house doesn't realize that they're the police. The guy in the house still doesn't realize that the police are the ones who, in fact, kicked in the door. So, basically, eventually they figure all this out. Kenneth Walker realizes it's the police outside. The police realize he was not trying to shoot the police. He comes out with his hands up, walking backwards, and they take him to jail. Breonna Taylor, meanwhile, has died. Oh, the one important thing to mention here. After the police exited the hallway, one of the officers ran around the side of the building to the window. I think it was the bedroom window, Breonna Taylor's bedroom window, and fired 10 rounds in through the window, basically blind firing. Now, this is first of all against departmental policy. It's also just an idiotic move for anyone who has ever messed with firearms. You don't just shoot a gun into a room. You have no idea who's in the room. That's a terrible idea. So I don't know what he was thinking, but he went around the side of the building and fired basically through some blinds, it looked like. So he couldn't see into the room, just knew that, hey, this is the room that guy just dove into, and fired 10 rounds off into the room. Now, all three of the officers who shot their weapons had been placed on administrative leave. One was fired. The guy who ran around the side of the building and fired blindly in through the blinds, that guy was fired because they're like, you can't just do that. You can't just shoot a gun blindly into a house. Now, the other 2 officers were placed on administrative leave, which is basically pretty standard for any shooting-involved incident. And Kenneth Walker was he was charged with initially with, I can't actually remember, attempted murder or something like that. They dropped the charges pretty quickly. And side note, I am very happy that they did. Kenneth Walker, again, he seems very believable. I believe him when he said he didn't know it was the police. I doubt in the moment he came up with such a brilliant plan to call 911, and I doubt that he's a good enough actor to have pulled off the acting job that would have been required on that 911 call. So I believe him when he says, I thought it was Jamarcus Glover. I thought it was this bad ex-boyfriend, this drug dealer who was coming to the house to do me some harm. I didn't know it was the police. He, again, seems very credible. And I was thinking in that situation, I don't know how else I would have responded. Had someone kicked open my door and I didn't know it was the police, I didn't know it was anyone, I throw rounds down that hallway too. I shoot back. I shoot at someone kicking a door open to my house. I am a very firm believer if someone comes into your home and you don't want them there, then it's on. I get that. Now, from the flip side of this though, here's the bit that people in the street right now don't understand. The police have every right to be at that house. Again, a suspected house linked to drug activity in the neighborhood, linked to this guy, Jamarcus Glover, who's a bad dude. All the stuff we went over earlier. The police had every right to be at that house. Now, the fact that Kenneth Walker and Breonna Taylor were inside, they didn't hear the police announce themselves, okay, that's unfortunate. The police use a battering ram. They hit the door and immediately are met with gunfire. They fire back. They don't shoot first, but they fire back at someone who just shot at them and hit one of the police officers, almost killed him. Now, here's the bit that I don't understand from the people who are saying that these cops need to be charged with murder. What do they expect the police to do in this situation? Okay, the police are serving a warrant. They go through a door to serve a warrant, and they're immediately met with gunfire. Now, this is, by the way, this is not disputed. Kenneth Walker says he fired first. The police say he fired first. There's no one here who's saying that the police shot first and Kenneth Walker was shooting in self-defense. What they're saying is Kenneth Walker believed that he was shooting in self-defense by shooting first, right? Somebody came into his house unannounced. He shot first because you have the right to protect your home. You don't have to wait for someone to shoot at you. But the police, being on the other end of that, they do have to return fire to someone who just shot at them. So they returned fire down the hallway, hit Breonna Taylor, again, in the crossfire, which is a terrible, unfortunate thing that happened. It is. It is a bad deal that occurred. However, what do they expect the police to do here? And why do they think that this rises to the level of murder? All the reasons I listed, the police had to show up to that house. The fact that she had this unfortunate entanglement with this known drug dealer, and the fact that he had, it appears at least, been using her house to move drugs and or money. There's also a phone call recording of Jamarcus Glover in jail where he talks about the fact that he had something like, I can't remember what the number is, $25,000 cash at Breonna Taylor's apartment hidden that he thinks the police seized. Now, he'd been talking about this after she had been killed. Now, the big problem that I see is that these protesters, the people who are protesting her death, everyone, police involved, the protesters, the people who, like myself, who generally come out and try, I don't try, but I generally give law enforcement the benefit of the doubt. All of us say this is a tragic circumstance because Breonna Taylor, none of what I said about her being entangled with this Jamarcus Glover guy, none of it says that she deserved to die. Nobody out there thinks Breonna Taylor deserved to get shot. However, when the police are fired upon and they return fire, when anyone is shot at and they shoot back, there is always the chance that there's going to be collateral damage or people caught in the crossfire. And that's what Breonna Taylor was. Now, should those cops be charged with murder for that? Absolutely not. No. They had every right to be at that house, and they didn't do anything. Now, the one cop who goes outside, by the way, here's the caveat I'll say to this. The cop who went outside to shoot in through the bedroom window, he was actually charged with the crime. He was charged with, I think it's wanton endangerment is the actual statute, which basically means a disregard for human life. He shot through a window that he couldn't see into, didn't know what was going on, and actually some of those rounds went into a neighboring apartment where there were people sleeping. So this guy, he actually was charged with the crime. Now, this isn't murder, and this is what people are upset about. They're saying that he got charged with a crime. He's not going to spend time in jail, and this is terrible. This is a miscarriage of justice. Now, it's just not true. That guy, yeah, he should be charged with something, and he was charged with something. He was charged with the appropriate crime. Now, this would all, by the way, this would all change if the bullets that he fired from outside the apartment were the ones that killed Breonna Taylor, but they weren't. That just doesn't appear to be the case. The initial volley of return fire down the hallway is what killed Breonna Taylor. And that's a problem for people who want anyone charged with murder. Is what you're saying is you want to charge an officer who had just been shot in the line of duty with murder for returning fire. It's never going to happen. This is never going to happen. I don't understand what people want police officers to do in this situation. Should he have been shot and then say, oh, no, we're the police. Please don't shoot us again because you obviously just didn't know it was us. That's not how this works. From their perspective, they kicked open the door, used a battering ram. They kicked open the door to a house of a known drug dealer's associate, right? They knew that there was a gentleman in the house, and I don't know if they thought it was Jamarcus Glover, but they knew that there was a guy in the house, and they knew that this was the house of a known, or a house of a known associate to a big-time drug dealer in the neighborhood. So they went in the house, having already announced themselves, which again is agreed on by the neighbors and the police, who say they had announced themselves. And right when they hit the door, they're met with gunfire, and they return fire. How do you want the police to act differently? Now, if you say don't serve no-knock warrants, okay, I'm open to that discussion. No-knock warrants have a purpose, but I'm at least open to that. But if you want to say that they should be charged with murder because they went through a door and returned fire after one of their officers was shot, well, you're just out of your mind. You just have no idea what you're talking about. You just don't know what policing actually looks like. When you are serving a warrant and you're met with gunfire, you are going to return fire. It's just the way it's the way of the world. And if you expect officers to put themselves in a line of danger and not defend themselves, well, you're living in a fantasy world. So no, these cops shouldn't be charged with murder. That's not the way it works. That's not the way the statute works, and that's not what this situation dictated. The way that people talk in the street, they say that these cops showed up at some random woman's house. It was the wrong address, is what they'll say. They went to the wrong house. Well, they didn't go to the wrong house. And they didn't just execute an unarmed, random black woman. That's not what happened. Again, it's unfortunate. The police say it's unfortunate. I say it's unfortunate. The protesters say it's unfortunate. The difference is that when they say it's unfortunate, they're also saying it's criminal, and I'm saying it's not. It's not criminal. It's unfortunate, and it is a terrible circumstance. But terrible circumstances happen, and it's not murder. These police officers didn't murder anyone. They didn't go there with the intention of murdering Breonna Taylor. But when met with gunfire, things happen when you return fire. And that is the unfortunate fact. It's not Kenneth Walker's fault. It's not Breonna Taylor's fault. It's not the officer's fault. It's the entire circumstance that led to this moment in time. And so, no, this is not victim blaming to say that there were circumstances in Breonna Taylor's life that led the police to the door that day. That is the unfortunate bit. That is an unfortunate reality. If her life had taken a slightly different course, mainly had she not been involved with this terrible person who is dealing drugs in the community, then those police never show up at that door. The only reason they were there is because of her association with Jamarcus Glover. And that is the truth. And that is an unfortunate truth because by all accounts, again, she seemed like a good person, went to work and came home and then was kind of leaving Jamarcus Glover in the past and trying to focus more on this Kenneth Walker, who again, by all accounts, seems like a good dude. For me to say that, by the way, he has to be a pretty good dude because he did shoot a police officer, and I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here. So anyway, the whole circumstance is unfortunate. I think last night in the city where there were protests, looked like 2 officers were shot last night. I don't know. I haven't seen any updates on whether or not what their condition is yet, but it's terrible. It's terrible that this has escalated so far, this war on the police. And I wish we could all just realize that the police they're not the bad guys. They're really not. The problem of racism in the police departments across America is so minuscule. It really is. There is no statistical data to back up anything that says that racism in the police departments is a giant problem in Black America. It really doesn't. It doesn't exist, and that's unfortunate because it's a conversation that's based on emotion and empathy rather than facts and figures. And that doesn't lead to anything productive. And that is incredibly unfortunate in our conversation around policing in America today, and race in America today. People who say things like these officers need to go to jail for murder lead the charge in the protests while not demonstrating that they're familiar with any facts in the case. And these are, by the way, these things that I'm listing, these are all from the New York Times. All these facts about Breonna Taylor and her association with Jamarcus Glover. It's not me just putting together threads of a conspiracy theory. These are just verifiable facts from both the police officers who were involved in the case, Kenneth Walker, as well as reporting from the New York Times and other news agencies. And so that's why it's unfortunate, because most people I don't think are familiar with this. Again, most people probably think that the police just showed up at a random house, or really they think it's the wrong address. They went to the wrong house, and that's just clearly not true. Anyway, I wanted to touch just a little bit about this so we could clarify why those officers aren't going to be charged, and so we could talk about why they showed up at that house in the first place, and also just so we could say, if we want to talk about racism in policing, we have got to find better examples than this. This is unfortunate. Everyone agrees. But it's not a good example of racism in the police department. It has never been a good example. But people will hold it up alongside any other shooting of unarmed black people in the United States and just cry racism. And that's really not, it's not good. It's not good. It's not productive. So I hope we can get past that and we can focus on places that we can actually make change and a difference. Because if you're demonstrating here that this is the prime example of racism in the police, most people are just not going to see it. And if you want to make some positive changes to policing, saying, all right, well, it looks like we're going to get rid of no-knock warrants. Okay, well, there's a change. But my whole thing is, if Kenneth Walker and Breonna Taylor had been white in this exact same circumstance and the police kicked in that door, do you think Breonna Taylor would be alive if she had been white in the exact same circumstances? The answer is obviously no. If Kenneth Walker was white and he shot at the police, do they not shoot back because they say, hold on, at the end of this hallway, they looked white? Does anyone really think that? The answer is no. The answer is obviously no. And it's just silly to pretend otherwise. Anyway, we're going to leave it there today. I am glad to be back, people. This last month has been insane in life, but no excuse not to be doing the podcast more consistently. So we're going to be out here more often. As it stands right now, I hope everyone out there is having a lovely day, and we will, in fact, be back very soon. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Hope you enjoy this episode. I will talk to you later.